to my channel and the first knitting podcast. My name is Addie. I live in the southeast of the UK with my husband and my daughter and my dog. I am a knitter and a stay-at-home mum. What else? I suppose I learnt to knit when I was about 8. My grandma taught me to knit and I didn't really pick it up again until briefly I picked it up when I was in my sort of university years, my early 20s, and then I picked it up again when my daughter was about 8 or 9 months old, and I've kind of been knitting ever since then. So it's been a few years now. I think it's, well, she's 3 now, so it's been about 3 years, and yeah, thought I'd come on here, talk a bit about my knitting. But yeah, shall we kind of get into it? So I've got some finished objects, I've got some whips, and I've got some plans to talk about. I know lots of people usually do some acquisitions at the end. I don't actually have any with me today. I've got some yarn on the way, so I suppose in a future podcast I can talk about that, but today I just have some plans and I've got some swatches, but I thought that might be nice to kind of chat through anyway. I've got a cup of tea, and yeah, shall we get into some finished objects? So my first finished object is a knit for my daughter, who, as I said, is 3, and every year I knit her a Christmas jumper, and every year I do it in November and I speed knit and get really stressed out about it, and this year I decided no more, we're not doing that this year, so I decided to knit it now. I also thought as like her shape and size isn't really going to change too much, it wasn't going to be too much of an issue to knit it now. I think before, because babies grow so quickly and young kids grow so quickly, I sort of got quite nervous that she was going to grow out of it before she actually wore it. But this year I've kind of come to my senses a little bit on that one and knit it in advance. And I've also knitted it to be a little bit oversized so that she can wear it maybe even next year. So I have made her the Jingle Bells jumper from Phil Kalana. Looks a bit like this. Just got some lovely colour work on the yoke, and then you add in these French knots that kind of look like baubles and stars on top of the Christmas tree after you've knitted everything, and then the colour work continues down the cuff and also on the bottom just before the ribbing. So it was a really nice kind of like dipping my toes back into colour work. I have knit colour work before, but I don't tend to do a lot of it, and I'm not really sure why, because I do really enjoy knitting it. I don't know, I think sometimes I just sort of stick with kind of one colour knits, maybe just for the ease of only having to buy one colour, and I don't have really any yarn shops around me, so sometimes I find it a little bit difficult sort of choosing colours online, because obviously you never know really what they look like until they arrive, so sometimes it's just easier to stick with one colour, and then if you don't like it you can send it back and you don't have to keep backwards and forwardsing. I knit mine in Sandnesgarn Merino in the colours, so this main colour is called Sandstone and this green is called Deep Green, and then all of the little baubles and the French knots and everything I sort of stash dived and kind of got all those little scraps that are sort of really too small to do anything with, but for some reason I hang on to, and I just thought, oh, I'll just use those and get rid of them. So I suppose it was useful hanging on to them. I used the recommended needles to knit this, so it's recommended 3.5mm needles, and the gauge is 22 stitches and 30 rounds per 10 centimetres or 4 inches. Yeah, so I knit the smallest size in this, which is age 4 years, and it gives me around about 3 to 4 inches of positive ease around my daughter's chest. The length I would say on this is not as long as I really wanted it to be. I've always kind of glossed over the fact that my daughter's quite tall, and so despite the fact that she is 3 and this is for age 4 years and it's quite oversized sort of around her, it's not as long as I maybe wanted it to. So I might have to go back in and maybe sort of do that trick, you know, where you cut your knitting and then you knit in a couple of extra inches and then you like graft it back together. So I might have to go in and do that maybe next year if she does shoot up again, but you never know really. Like, they just, sometimes they grow like bean poles and sometimes they kind of stay the same height for ages, so we shall see. I think the recommended yarns for this are Panilla and Alva from Filcolana, and I chose to use Santa's Gun Merino. First of all, because it's so soft and it's lovely to work with, and second of all, because now my daughter's at nursery, they do things like forest school, they're outside a lot, there's like a sand pit, there's Play-Doh and everything, and they also do Christmas jumper day. And so I thought, she likes to do a lot of kind of artsy crafty things at home, and at least if I can bung this in the washing machine if I need to, then it's a plus. I don't really like to put anything in the washing machine that's sort of hand knit really, because I just don't think it really benefits it very much, but if I have to, I can. And that, I suppose that's the joy of superwash, and because it grows quite well with blocking, although this didn't grow, but I suppose it could do if I really wanted it to. Give it a good stretch to get some extra wear out of it, because you know, it's going to go up in the loft for quite some time throughout the year and then only really come out for... Sorry, it's really windy here today and something has fallen over outside. So I'm sorry if you can hear the wind, but I can't control the weather. So yeah, I guess that's that. That's my first finished object. Oh, I've just realised I forgot to talk about what I'm wearing. So today I am wearing my another finished object, and it is my colour tip tee. This is a pattern by Emily Curtis of Gently Chaotic Knits, and it was her tee pattern that she came out with this summer, I believe. The suggested yarn is Pearl Soho Linen Quill, which I didn't find was kind of as readily available as other yarns here in the UK. So I decided to knit mine in Knitting for Olive Merino in the colour Kit or Putty, it says both. And yeah, it looks like this. It's got a set-in cap sleeve and it's got round neck. There is also an option in the pattern to put a pocket here, but I ran out of yarn so I couldn't add a pocket, and to be honest I don't really feel like mine needs it. I knit it to pattern length, which is a little bit short on me. It's just enough so that I can tuck it in at the front, just do that sort of half tuck business, but I have quite a long torso, and I probably should have taken that into account, but I do also wear high-waisted jeans and dungarees a lot, so it doesn't really bother me too much. I've sort of started to learn now that I need to add in 1 inch to 2 inches in a lot of patterns because I have such a long torso. I've got long torso and short legs, but I don't tend to knit a lot of trousers, so I guess that doesn't really help me. But yeah, so I knit this in, like I said, Knitting for Olive. Let's think. So the pattern gauge is 24 stitches and 36 rounds on 3.25mm needles, but I knit mine on a 3.5mm needle. I find that my gauge is kind of quite variable at the moment. Magic Loop, I seem to be very, very loose, but other than that, I'd say I'm quite an average knitter. I knit English style, if that's any help to anybody. So I knit size 2 in this, and that gives me about 4 inches of positive ease. I absolutely loved knitting this. It was such a joy. For some reason I stalled on it massively in the middle. And then I came back to it and I realised that all I had to knit was about 2-3 centimetres of body and the ribbing, and I just, for some reason, I just left it in a bag and just didn't finish it. So I finished it last week and it's so nice. It's so light because it's a fingering weight yarn, so it's not like a heavy t-shirt, but it's perfect for this kind of weather, just underneath the jacket, because it's last week is the typical English weather talk, right? So last week we had bright sunshine and it was sort of like 20-25 degrees, but a little bit chilly in the morning. And then this week it's like torrential downpour, really windy, like typical autumnal weather, which is glorious. It was good week for drying things outside last week, and then this week it's good week for wearing knitwear. So I suppose here we are. Oh, like in the pattern it says to use contrast colours for the neckband, armhole ribbing and bottom ribbing, and also the ribbing on the top of the pocket. But I didn't have any contrast yarn, so I initially bought this yarn to make a Lou cami, but I started it, I got to the point where I joined all of the triangles and I just stalled and decided to reclaim the yarn and knit something else that I thought I was going to get a little bit more wear out of. So here we are, and I'm so happy with this. I think it's a really lovely piece and it's definitely filled a bit of a gap in my knitwear wardrobe. And I guess that's my second finished object, and I suppose we should just move on to the last one. Alright, so my last finished object is quite small and it's sort of like a homeware object, and it was one of those things that I saw the pattern come out and I kind of immediately thought, I need one of those, and cast it on. So it's yet another free pattern, and it is the Homebodies Friend by NoFrillsKnitting. I knit this up in some sort of quite large scraps from my yarn stash, and yeah, I think it's really lovely. I did have to do a bit of jiggery pokery with the pattern for this because the pattern is written for a 2-litre hot water bottle, and I think mine is maybe a 1.5 litre hot water bottle or something along those lines. It's definitely not quite the size that the pattern suggests it's for, so I just measured across to see how wide it was and also how tall it was. This bit, the neck of the water bottle, is the same as the pattern, so I didn't really do anything with that bit. But so yeah, I just altered my stitch counts and my length to fit my hot water bottle, and I think it worked out really well, to be honest. It fits perfectly, it doesn't kind of like flap about or slide off. I've not actually used it yet because it's not been cold enough to use a hot water bottle yet, so I suppose we'll see how that goes when it gets chilly, but I have no worries about it. I think the yarns that I used, I believe that this is Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool in marzipan, and it was left over from a big cable, like self-drafted cable jumper that I knit for myself, which I'm sure you'll probably see at some point. The blue is Peer Gynt from Sandner's Garn, and it's left over from my weekender hat that I knit last year. The red is from my daughter's Christmas jumper last year, so that's also Peruvian Highland wool in the colour Christmas red. And this pink, I think, is Peer Gynt again in old pink, which I got a couple of balls of just to test out last year, and then never really knit anything out of them, but for some reason they've gone missing and I only had about that much left in my stash. So I just about had enough of this Peruvian Highland wool to get this out of it. I think I've got the bit left in here somewhere. yeah, so I had about, I'd say 2/3 of a ball left, of a 50-gram ball left, and this is all I have left now. There we go. I'm kind of blindly hoping that everything's in focus here because I'm filming this on my phone, and I've kind of got this kind of really dodgy setup of having a mirror placed behind it, sort of balanced on a chair and a stool, so hopefully everything's in focus and it's not too distracting if I'm actually looking behind me just to check that I'm actually in frame and everything, because I can see obviously the mirror behind it. But anyway, yeah, this is all I have left of the Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool that I use for the main colour, and everything else I do have a fair bit left of, but that's fine. My aim this year is to try and knit some things to kind of get through this enormous basket of kind of scrap balls that are left over from other knits that I've done, or like half balls that I've got left, and it's really full, but they're all different weights, they're all different fibres, they're all, some of them are superwash, some of them are not, so it's not really something that I can kind of put together into one thing. If you have any good sort of like scrap busting patterns that use like 1/3 of a ball or striped like this, then I'm all ears. Anyway, back to this. So this is, it's another free pattern. It's available on Ravelry, but it links you back to the No Frills Knitting blog that it's on, and I can pop a link to that down below. I believe they've made a smaller version of this as well. It's like the shopkeeper's friend or something along those lines. So I think I might see if I can make a couple of those as Christmas gifts this year, because this was so quick to knit up. I cast it on Friday. Was it Friday? No, I cast this on Saturday afternoon, and I cast it off Sunday morning. Yeah, so I cast it off Sunday morning, so it really didn't take me very long at all. It's all knit in the round. I think it's, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a really like a first like beginner pattern, but it would definitely be good for like an adventurous beginner, because there's nothing really hugely complicated apart from maybe the I-cord bind off, but it does say in the pattern that you can like completely omit that if you want to. So yeah, it's got a nice little, try and move my head out because I know that that can kind of affect the focus. Got a nice little I-cord bind off around the top, and some really nice sort of shoulder shaping. The gauge for this in the pattern is 21 stitches and 30 rounds, and it's knit on 3.5mm needles. I was a naughty knitter and I did not swatch for this, but I don't really think it's kind of too detrimental. It definitely fits. I haven't blocked it yet. I'm going to block it when I next use my hot water bottle, so I can kind of use the residual heat to dry it a bit quicker, because we are now reaching the point where it's going to take a lot longer for things to dry, because I can't put them outside anymore because it's so wet. I'm really looking forward to winter, full stop, really, because I'm just kind of a bit done with summer now. Not that even that we had a summer because it's been so wet, but I'm done with it. I'm done with it. I'm not a summer being. I'm 100% here for autumn. Right, and so that is all of my finished objects. And now we're into whips. So my first whip is a self-drafted pattern, and I'm knitting it for my husband. It's not the first time that I've knit this, but it is a completely new, I've gone straight back to basics, done all of the numbers again. Was it last year? Might have been the year before. I knit him a hoodie. He has always been a big hoodie person, apart from when it's too cold to wear a hoodie, and he wears another one of the knitted jumpers that I've done for him. And I'm not sure why, but I set out to knit him one. So I knit him one in drops merino extra fine, which is their DK weight superwash merino, in a sort of like forest green colour. And he wore that for a little while, and then he said he wanted a grey one, so I knit him a grey one. And now I am knitting him a, oh, everything's tangled, a black version. So this is as far as I've got so far. I am making a couple of changes to this one. So before, I knit him ones with a zip inserted, so they would have ribbing. I think the first one might actually have a double folded edging on it that I sewed down, and then I inserted the zip behind that to kind of make like a zip facing. And then the one that he wears the most now, the grey one, has got ribbing all the way up and around the hood and back down the front, and as like a zip facing. And then this one I've decided to do a double knit button band with buttonholes and buttons, just as a bit of a change. It's a raglan construction, and it's got some short rows in the back just to sort of, well, some short rows at the top to nicely shape the neckline and kind of bring the back up a little bit. I've just finished my first ball of yarn on this, so we've got some nice tails going on back here. And I've just added in this kind of like faux seam. Where is it? There we are. This sort of faux seam in there with a little pearl in the raglan, just to kind of add a little bit of interest to it. I did this on the second one of these that I knit for him, but I didn't do it down the raglan. I just did like a faux seam down the side and and then it carried up the sleeve as well. And he said to me, oh, I really like this bit, so I decided I'd add it into the raglan. I'm just tripping over my words today, I'm so sorry. I also knit myself a version of this, which is just over here. So yeah, this is my version, which is just a pullover version, because I don't tend to really, I wear cardigans, but I don't wear zip up hoodies very much. I'm not really sure why. I just don't. So yeah, this one is my version. So it's essentially going to look a bit like this, with the raglan down the sides, and then it's got, where is it? There we go. Got the faux seam down the body, and then that carries up the sleeve as well, and it's got a nice tapered sleeve and ribbing at the bottom. So essentially knitting the same thing for my husband, just with men's measurements, so broader shoulder, deeper yoke, etc. And his is knit flat for most of the body because he wants a button band and buttons. So I'm using 4mm needles. I'm once again using Drops Extra Fine Merino in, I think this is the colour charcoal or charcoal mix, something like that. And then I've added in 4 inches of Positive Ease just to kind of give him a nice bit of movement in there. It does knit up fairly quickly until you kind of get to the end of the yoke, where you're just still doing increases, but you've got sort of nearly like 300 stitches on there, and it just takes forever. But it's only for a little bit, isn't it? And then you split the sleeves and it all gets much shorter again. So yeah, that's self-drafted hoodie for my husband, which currently looks a bit like a large black banana, but you know, it will grow. My second whip is also for my husband, but this is a bit of a secret knit, because every year I also knit him a jumper for Christmas, and I've not done it as a surprise before, but now that my daughter's at nursery 3 hours in the morning, I've got a little bit more time to myself where he's not in the house. So I thought I'd give it a go. I mean, if we get to like the beginning of December and I've not really made any progress, then I'm going to have to start knitting this in the evenings, and he'll probably know that I'm knitting it for him. But it's not the end of the world really, is it? He's going to know about it eventually, because he'll be unwrapping it on Christmas Day. And like for the past 2 years that I've done this, he's known about it. So it's been quite useful really, because I got to do try-ons and stuff with him. So anyway, I'll just show it, shall I? Oh, and obviously it's as far away as it could possibly be on the sofa. So I am knitting him the Dad Sweater by Emily Curtis from Gently Chaotic Knits again. This pattern comes in like two size ranges. So one that is based off of women's sizing and one that's based off of men's sizing. So they're called like standard shoulder and broad shoulder. So I'm knitting this in size 3 broad shoulder to give me my husband's preferred measurements, which should hopefully work out quite well. I've had a couple of disasters recently knitting for him where like the yoke depth's been off, and he still wears them, but like if he wears a t-shirt underneath, which most of the time he does, it kind of like pulls it up underneath the jumper, which is, I mean, sounds quite irritating to be honest. So yeah, I've measured other jumpers that he is happy with and worked out what his preferred yoke depth is from that to hopefully get a good fit in this one. So I'm knitting this in British wool from Woolly Knit, and so I'm trying to do like a nice kind of marl in there. So I'm using 2 cones from Woolly Knit, which are now stuck in this project bag. So I'm using, this is chestnut. Hopefully these colours are coming out fairly kind of close to real life, but it is very grey and overcast today, so I wouldn't be surprised if they're all coming out a bit washed out anyway. But yeah, this is chestnut brown and this is cream, and I have already knit one jumper out of these. I knit a melange sweater man by Petite Knit initially for my husband back in April, and it didn't fit. To be honest, I didn't swatch, which is my fault, and yeah, it didn't fit, but it does fit me. So I have a jumper almost identical to this already in these yarns, and it's lovely. I love it, but I knit it for my husband, and he can't wear it. I mean, he can, but he looks a bit like he's wearing a jumper that's either been shrunk in the wash or was knit for him when he was about 15. So yeah, I decided I'd knit it again and then gift it to him for Christmas. So he finally has one, and then we'll just have to try not to wear them on the same day, or we'll just look like terrible matching people, which I know some people do, but I think it's a bit much when it's like this marl that looks a bit like TV static. Anyway, back to the pattern. So it's another satin sleeve. So this is the back piece that I've knit so far, and I've just started, I think I've done the first lot of sleeve shaping, so it's starting to kind of come out this way towards the underarm. It's like your typical drop shoulder really. You knit a back piece, then you knit 2 fronts, join them, knit down, and then join them in the round and knit the body, and then you pick up for the sleeves. And it's very similar to this, but obviously this is more kind of, this is 21 stitches per 10 centimeters, and this is 24 stitches per 10 centimeters. So this is coming out more sort of DK with 2 strands of fingering held together, and this was just 1 strand of fingering. I'm using 4mm needles, which is the recommended needle size. As I said before, I'm knitting the size 3 broad shoulder, which should give me roughly 18 centimeters of positive ease. So I also measured my husband's t-shirts just to double check, because you know they sort of come out, and then if they've got a lot of ease in them, then the sleeve doesn't actually start until like down here. I think that might have also been the problem. So I was knitting jumpers with the right amount of ease, but they had less ease than his t-shirts did, and so the t-shirt was just being squashed and going right up in your armpit, which is not ideal. So yeah, hopefully this should give me a really good fit. Like I said, it's knit in the British wool from Woolly Knit, which I have used. So obviously I've used these exact cones for my jumper, which it's a bit rustic. It's not merino soft, but I don't really have any problems with it. I mean, I don't really have a sensitivity to wool, but my daughter has got a couple of things knit in this, and she is 3 and she's quite vocal when something's not comfortable. So if she's quite happy wearing this, then I'm fairly sure that my husband will be too. And I've knit him things out of some rustic yarns before, so hopefully should all be fine. And hopefully he'll enjoy it, and hopefully I can get it done as well. That's a lot of hopefullys, isn't it? Whip number 3 is a pair of socks for myself. So I am knitting things for myself as well, not just for my husband, but I think because I've just finished up a couple of things for myself, and I've got some plans as well. So these socks are whip number 3. There we are. And these are the Just Peachy Pumpkin Socks by Stone Knits, and I'm knitting them in Filcolana Arvetta in, I think this is also, yeah, it's also called Charcoal. And then the orange is some West Yorkshire Spinners signature 4-ply in the colour Nutmeg. And then the green that I'm using on the top is the mini from a sock set that I got from the Lonely Knitter, which I didn't use to make socks, but yeah, it's in this lovely sort of green colour, and I didn't have any other green, and I thought, as it's just for the tops of the pumpkins, I didn't really mind what kind of shade of green it was. It's only socks. So yeah, I'm knitting these on 2.25mm needles. The suggested needle is a 2.25 for the ribbing, and then a 2.5 for the colour work. But my gauge when knitting colour work doesn't really tend to change too much, especially when I'm knitting magic loop. So I started off with a 2.5 and it was just way too loose, so I ripped back to the ribbing and I just carried on in a 2.25. And I kind of wish now that I had gone back and I had knitted my ribbing on a 2mm needle, so that it does kind of in a little bit more. But I might do that for the second sock. I mean, I'm not overly bothered, to be honest. I think these are really fun. I don't really tend to knit a lot of colourwork socks, but I think these are really funny, really cute, and it'll be a really nice addition for Halloween. I seem to be all about the like festive knits at the moment. I've had a Christmas jumper, got things that I'm knitting for people for Christmas, and now we've got some Halloween socks. So here we are. What else can I say about these? Oh, I am going to make a couple of changes to the pattern for these. So the pattern has a short row heel, which I'm just about, so I've just finished the leg and I'm about to do the heel on my first sock, and then I'll obviously be going on to do the foot. But the foot in the pattern has got colour work all the way down, but I'm not sure what it is, but I just really don't like the feeling of colour work, like the strands, the floats, there we go, floats, underneath my feet on colourwork socks. So I haven't quite decided yet, I'm either going to do like quite a thick stripe of the nutmeg and the charcoal down the foot, or I'm going to just continue in the charcoal down the foot and then perhaps do like a contrast toe, so that I can just get a little bit more wear out of them and they're just that little bit more comfortable. I'm not sure if anybody else has that issue with colourwork socks, and I mean stripes are fine, but I wonder if that's because when I carry the yarn down it's kind of on the side of my foot and not underneath. But yeah, I just can't stand the feeling of it. So yeah, those are the changes that I'm going to make to those. So yeah, just about to start the heel of the first sock, and then hopefully carry on. And I think I'm going to book to go to one of our local farms around the kind of October half term, which is just before Halloween. And my daughter's gotten really into like the idea of Halloween this year, so hopefully I'll be able to wear them for that, but we shall see. I've got a couple of other things obviously on the needles at the moment, so we'll just see how far I get with these. Even if I only get one done, I'm going to wear it, so we shall see how we get on with those. Oh, this pattern comes with two different colourwork charts. So one has got peaches and one has got pumpkins, so I thought that was really good because I can also knit myself a pair with peaches on. I've got a dress that I sewed, like a shirred bodice puff sleeve dress with peaches on, so maybe I can knit myself some peachy ones and wear them with that. So yeah, that is whip number 3, and that is my last whip of today. Hopefully I didn't waffle on too much through all of that. And now I've got some plans, things that I'm going to knit, yarns that I'm going to knit with. So yeah, move on to that, shall we? So first I've got some swatches for these as well. So first up I have got this darling little swatch. Both of these swatches need to be blocked. I just haven't had a chance because I knit them last night and then cast them off, and then immediately this morning had to do the school run and then started filming this. So here we are. So yeah, this is my swatch so far. There we go. And this top yarn is, top and bottom I suppose, is Drops Daisy in the colour 06, and then the boucle, I always feel like I'm saying that wrong, but I've heard other people say boucle, so I'm going to stick with it and just hope that they were right, is this lovely hand dye from The Lonely Knitter, and this was from her Ice and Fire collection, and it's just beautiful. It's got like peaches and pinks and purples and creams, and it's the colourway Little Dove, which I believe is based on Sansa Stark, if you watch Game of Thrones. Or watched, I suppose it finished quite a while ago now really, didn't it? And this is going to be a jumper for my daughter, which I'm going to sort of draft like a round yoked? Yeah. A round yoked jumper for her in this kind of thick stripe, which seems to be very like on trend at the moment, for her to wear this winter. She's really into like her pinks and her purples, so hopefully she'll like this. I showed her the swatch. No, I showed her the yarn yesterday, and she was really enthusiastic about it. So hopefully we get through the like 3-year-old initial thing of, I don't want to wear that, and she actually does want to wear this, because I'd hate to knit it and then she doesn't get any wear out of it. I suppose I could unravel it and knit myself something, but hopefully not. So yeah, that's that swatch. There we go. And then my second thing that I'm hopefully going to be knitting is for myself, and it's also with yarn from The Lonely Knitter, who I'm not sponsored by. But I sort of went a bit mad recently and bought loads and loads of yarn from her, which is great because I'd like to support more dyers if I can, but I don't usually buy a lot of hand dye, and I seem to have bought a lot of hand dye recently. Anyway, so this is my swatch for that. This is also from her Ice and Fire collection. So this is Hold the Door, which is based on Hodor. And this is going to be a swatch for a striped sweater by Andrea Mowry, so I bought a whole 100-gram skein of this, which is now here in cake form. So it's sort of just a really nice solid kind of greyish white, and there are a few speckles in there, but you can't actually see any in this cake, they're hidden further down. So yeah, this is going to be my main colour for my neckline, my cuffs and my bottom ribbing. And I need to do a little bit of maths for the stripes because I've got more colours than the pattern calls for in the stripes, but I think I've also got less yarn per stripe, so my plan is to do a couple of rounds of this in between each stripe to also break them up a bit so that you can really appreciate each different colourway. So I need to do a little bit of maths still, but these are my contrast colours, which I've not caked up yet, and I'm going to try and show the best as the best that I can. So these, oh wait a minute, 1 minute, hair everywhere. So these are the minis from the Ice and Fire collection. Oh oh dear. Yeah, so these are the minis from the Ice and Fire collection. There were 2 different options. So there was the variegated and there was the tonals. Does that make sense? Yes, variegated and the tonals. I hope I've got that right. Anyway, I bought both with plans to make this jumper because I saw a version that had been knit with an advent and I thought, oh, that looks really cool. But I didn't want to buy an advent because I get quite nervous about not knowing what the colours are going to be, and whether or not I'm going to like them, and especially if I'm going to be knitting a jumper to wear. I mean, if I was knitting something else, then I probably wouldn't be too bothered. But I thought if it's going to be something that I'm going to wear, I'm probably going to want to be a little bit more selective of what the colours are. And I saw all of these and I thought, oh, they're absolutely lovely. And although they're not all kind of this, well, obviously they're not all the same. I think with an extra couple of rounds of Hold the Door in the middle, I think they're all going to look really lovely together. So I've done a bit of like colour planning, and I've like taken a couple of pictures of what order I'm going to put them in. So all I've got left is to just do a little bit of maths, block my swatch, figure out if my gauge is right, and just figure out how many rounds per stripe, per colour that I'm going to do. So yeah, there's some really lovely colours in here. There's a couple of like mustards, and we've got some blues, and oh, so this one is the mini from the Hold the Door, mini of Hold the Door. So this will not be having a stripe of its own because I just think it's going to look funny having like a big stripe of this, especially if it's going to be for the neckline and the like all of the finishing edges, and also between each of the stripes as well. So I just thought it's going to look really odd if there's one of these in the middle, so I'm going to keep this, and then if I've got it as like a backup if I'm running low on this for the cuffs and everything. And I mean, I'm sure I'm going to find something to do with a pale neutral mini, even if I use it for socks. Yeah, we got some greens in here and some sort of greys and ooh, hair on everything. Some greys and browns, another blue, and yeah, ooh, got some sort of like reddish tones and pinks as well. So this is again Little Dove, which is it's the same colourway that I'm using for my daughter's jumper. So it'll be nice to have a little bit of matching in there as well, but not being like in your face matching. So yeah, that's going to be a jumper for me, which hopefully I'm going to get cast on soon, because I feel like I'm going to need it soon because it's not all that warm when you're getting out of the house at like 8 o'clock in the morning to go and take her to nursery, and yeah, it's a bit chilly. So all of those are on a 75-25 sock base. It's a superwash merino base with nylon, I believe. I've taken the band off them, so I can't confirm. I'll have to look it up and I'll pop it down below. But yeah, I think that's everything. I hope you've enjoyed watching this, if anybody has watched it. Otherwise it's just me chatting away in my living room. Yeah, I'd love to know what you're knitting, what you're planning to knit, what maybe you're stalling on knitting. My tea has gone completely cold. Yeah, that's really cold. So I'm gonna go and make another one and edit this, maybe do a bit of B-roll if I need to. I suppose you'll find out if I need to or not, because it will either be in there or it won't. But yeah, hopefully this has all gone okay. And I will see you in the next one.